Hi, welcome back. My name is Amber, and today I wanted to continue in this episode from a conversation that I've been sharing about recently, which is pelvic health. And in particular, I want to start to talk a little bit more about the pelvic floor muscles. And how do we know what is going on with our pelvic floor muscles in our body? And before I go further, I will definitely clarify that I am not a physiotherapist, and if you really want to have a very accurate picture of what's going on with your pelvic floor, if at all possible and you have the luxury to do so, book an appointment with a women's health physiotherapist, and for men, for a pelvic health physiotherapist, because you can get very clear information on what is the state of your pelvic floor, and also wonderful biofeedback to know, are you engaging with your pelvic floor properly, as well as looking at your overall core functionality. So I highly recommend that. But in the meantime, there are also things that you can do to cultivate your own body awareness, to become familiar with what's happening in your body, to kind of look out for certain signs and symptoms that can create a picture for you so you know more clearly what's going on. So if you want to review the pelvic floor, where it is, where it's located, some of the functions of the pelvic floor, just go back to my previous episodes. Right now I want to talk about the pelvic floor muscles in general and how they are functioning in the body through recruitment and through release. So just like any muscle, we know that a muscle is going to be able to recruit and it needs to be able to soften or release. Okay? And if we were, let's say, training the bicep, we know that we can contract the bicep and we also need to release the bicep, and it needs both of these functions. So the pelvic floor is similar. And that's why I like the analogy that it's like a trampoline rather than a hammock, because a trampoline creates this picture that, yes, it has movement. So we know that the pelvic floor is sitting at the base of the pelvic outlet. We know that the pelvic floor is able to recruit when it needs, and it's also able to soften and release when it needs. And this is evidenced by the way it functions with the diaphragm when we're breathing. So we know with the inhale, the diaphragm comes down, the pelvic floor receives that intra-abdominal pressure, and as the diaphragm lifts back into place, so does the pelvic floor. So they work together in harmony with a very functional breath, especially if posture is aligned. Okay? And so we know that we need this kind of trampoline action of the pelvic floor. We need it to be able to lift and to be able to release. And this is also what is allowing us to be able to release elimination from the body, to pee when we want, to poo when we want, to be able to control our elimination, as well as giving us sexual appreciation, helping us with a functional breath, and giving us support to everything inside the body, and also giving support and navigation for a baby as they're birthing through birth canal. And so the pelvic floor obviously has a lot of function, and kind of the next questions come, well, how do I know the state of my pelvic floor? And there are some signs that you can look out for. So for a pelvic floor that is constantly over-recruited, so it means it's in this contracted state, which, by the way, is still considered a weak pelvic floor because it has difficulty to contract and difficulty to release. So if a pelvic floor is constantly in this contracted state, some of the things that you might experience could be that there's a sense of urgency to go to the toilet. You just feel like suddenly I have to go, and if anyone is in my way, I'm not going to make it. So that urgency to be able to get to the toilet on time. You might be experiencing pain on intercourse, and for women, pain on inserting anything into the vagina, even if it's tampon or moon cup. And sometimes even if you palpate around the sitting bones, even if I just showed on the pelvis, if you palpate around the sitting bones, and you feel some tenderness there, then that can also indicate possibly that there are over-recruited pelvic floor muscles. And sometimes this can also be connected to low back pain as well. So some of the signs that you might be looking out for if you have under-recruited pelvic floor, so if the pelvic floor is having difficulty to just even recruit back to neutral, let alone to be able to recruit fully, then this is also considered a weak pelvic floor. And some of the signs you might look out for in that situation is maybe that you're leaking urine when you cough, laugh, or sneeze, or do any kind of effort. Can feel like things are falling out of the vagina, maybe even having difficulty holding in a tampon or a moon cup. Even queefing or vaginal farts can be connected to having under-recruited pelvic floor. And so these are some of the signs and symptoms that you might want to look out for. And interestingly, with pelvic floor dysfunction, there tends to be low back pain that is also connected to that and can affect other functions in the body. So kind of start to bring some body awareness and take note of what are you experiencing to give you a little bit clearer picture. What I like to do in my classes and in these videos is to create an overall body awareness where you start to connect to this part of your body. You start to connect through visualization and also through somatically feeling your posture and your breath, and then getting an idea of what is your control like over the pelvic floor. Are you able to connect to the different muscle groups within the pelvic floor? Are you able to lift the pelvic floor? Are you able to release the pelvic floor? Which, by the way, these two functions are equally important. So I love to first start there, creating connection to your body. And then when you have an idea of what's happening in your body, then you can start to tailor the exercises you do. Maybe if you are over-recruited, maybe you're going to need to focus more on releasing the pelvic floor and stretching the pelvic floor. And if you're under-recruited, maybe you're going to need to work on giving more tone to the pelvic floor, so doing more lifting and more repetitive exercises. So the way that you go about supporting your pelvic floor really depends on what's going on for you. And not to complicate things, but you could even have a combination of being over-recruited and under-recruited. So that's why I also suggest starting with your body awareness, looking at the signs in your body, cultivating your intuition of what's happening. But if you have time, definitely time and luxury to do this, definitely seek out a physiotherapist that specializes in pelvic health so that you can have a lot clearer understanding. So I wish you all the success in your pelvic health journey, and just to encourage you again that having a toned and balanced pelvic floor is our birthright, and we do not need to go through life experiencing leakage of urine or pain on intercourse or any of these symptoms. We have a right to have best quality of life and functioning pelvic floor. So I wish you all the success on this journey and hope we meet again.